Okay, this is Daniel Gracie, G2 Comics, and we're back again for a comic book coloring tutorial. We're going to be getting into doing some actual modeling on the figure right now. And we showed you in the previous videos on how to lay down flat colors and how to set up your document for color. And then as a precursor to all this, we have the ink washing tutorial, which you may use and may not use depending on what kind of inks you're dealing with. The first thing you need to remember is when you're going to color that you want to, we were using our pencil tool to lay down our flat colors and it gave us our nice crisp edge. Well, we're going to switch off that to the brush tool, and you can do that by the sidebar here, or you can do Shift B to cycle through your brushes. You're going to want to use that to get your smoother gradient, your gradient effects on your brush. Second thing to do before you start getting into coloring is mess around and make some brushes for yourself. It's going to make everything go a lot easier. Laying down textures and whatnot is going to be a lot easier for you when you have a brush instead of trying to meticulously create these textures that you could easily use with a brush tool that you've already made. You can go through the brush presets and kind of adjust everything differently. Go through different brushes that Photoshop has as a default tools, and you can adjust those as well. That's what I've done with a few of these. Like right here, I've got this this nice little texture for armor or whatnot. A little energy blast looking thing that we can use. So right now, I obviously think everything looks a little dull. I like to start on the background first, just because that's what's going to affect how the figure looks and what color the figure is actually going to be. All the dual lighting and whatnot. So to select the background color, I want to uncheck contiguous, because you remember if you uncheck it, then it's going to select all of the same color at one time. So boom, I've got all the little nooks and crannies selected here just by doing that, and I've got my background color selected. So I'm going to choose my texture brush, which I like using this for the backgrounds a lot, and I'm going to pull up a little bit of a yellowy color here. I'm going to go and do the body first, just because that's, I believe, the hardest part to do. I'm going to select the whole body. Remember, contiguous is off, so it selects all the skin tones. And I'm going to check that back on here. And what I'm going to do is, I know the light source is coming in from the top left to the top right. I'm first going to Control H and turn these off. You can cycle through them. I don't like them on because it distracts me. So Control H cycles it on and off. It's still selected here. I'm going to grab my gradient tool, and I'm going to choose this color, and then I'm going to take a little bit of a step up here, a little bit lighter right there, and I'm going to go radial. I'm just going to kind of sweep through right here and right there, just take it up a little bit. I'm going to go a little brighter. The light, I want the light to affect one part of the body where it's closest to the light, rather than going around and using the same color on different parts, just because I'm going to work on some higher tones up here towards the top and on this side of the body than I am over on this side of the body. So right here, since I've done this gradient, I know that I'm going to be able to eyedrop this, and I'm going to be taking steps up higher than eyedropping something that's over here, which is going to be a little darker color, if you can follow that. So now that that's done, like I said, I still have the body selected. I'm going to use my airbrush tool, and I'm going to use the one that has no pen pressure, just because I don't want any kind of muddy marks. And I'm going to take the eyedropper tool right here and make sure that I've got my airbrush settings at 30 and 100% flow. And I'm going to start selecting colors and stepping everything up. Now you don't want to go too high on these color ranges, because you'll definitely see some muddiness. But this looks good, and you're just going to repeatedly lay this color down over these spots. And I'm getting a little bright here, so I'm going to use it on a different area. I'm getting really bright there. So I'm going to take this down a notch and just go through and show where my surfaces are right here. And as you can see, it's coming together quite well. You just got to know where everything's hitting. And I suggest eyedropping the hell out of your image, because you're going to think that you have the right color, and it's going to be too light in certain spots, and it's going to be too dark in certain spots. So every place that you go, make sure you just pull that eyedropper tool back out and use it again. Now what I'm going to do is, right now that I've got all this stuff laid out kind of where I want it, I'm going to switch back to my dynamic tool because I want to get in little nooks and crannies, and I don't want everything to be the same brush size when I go back and do this. I don't know if I just mentioned, but when you're laying down all this color, you want to it doesn't really matter right now, because what you're going to be doing is going back and adding your shadows on top of it to define everything. So I think this looks pretty good so far. I'm just going to pull some more shadow out right there. Now I'm going to go over and I'm going to start doing my extreme highlights. So again, I just work my way up this scale a little bit. I like to get into my yellows right there and just kind of carefully place everything where I want it. Remember, I'm seeing the light coming from the top left, so that's where I'm trying to keep everything at. And you don't want to go over your color, or you don't want to use your highlights at the lines, at the line art right there, at the ink lines. You want to place your highlights in the middle of the surface, because you're not going to be hitting your highlights right on the edge here. It's going to be sort of in the middle, kind of like a crest, or wherever the surface has its crest is where you're going to hit the highlights at. So my highlights for the breasts aren't going to be right here. They're going to be a little more right here because of the rounded surface and that kind of thing. It's going to look flat if you do it that way, if you do it the other way. So pay attention to do that. And I'm just going to keep working on everything. Like I said, I dropped the hell out of it because I just went on a darker color. I'm still moving up with the yellows a little bit. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to switch to a non-airbrush tool. I'm going to go back up and do 100% and back down to 30 on this one, so I can really start getting in and modeling and making it look like it's kind of painted or airbrushed on here. And I'm going to sample my colors. I'm going to go through here and do a little bit of this. Remember, like the pinkish kind of reddish tones are what you're going to go through first, and then you're going to start working your way up to yellow. The warm light from the sunlight is what's going to be what my highlights are going to be, and whenever you have a warm highlight, you're going to have a cool shadow. So just keep that in mind. A little bit of color theory right there. So everything's starting to take effect. You know, like I said, you just want to keep playing around with it. I like the control of not having the 100% opacity there, just because you can easily move over it and take the mud away from the image. And moving up a little bit further here, more my highlights. And now I'm getting a little bit too yellow, so I'm going to backtrack that a little bit and move straight up here. And it's all about, you know, trial and error. You're just messing around. Once you have that perfect color, it's going to be a lot easier, and you know, you can use that with the other images that you're going to be doing with your sequential pages and that kind of thing. It's kind of, you know, difficult at the beginning figuring out what your character is going to look like if it's a pinup or whatnot, just because you don't already have a color set for it. So I'm going to go right now. I think I've gotten pretty much everything modeled the way that I like it, so I'm going to go start adding my extreme highlights to it. And that's just pulling everything up and making, oh, that's a little too yellow. Pulling everything out, and these extreme highlights are going to sit on top of this. You're not going to really blend them in too much because you want to get that nice glistening effect on it. You can see how, you know, she's starting to get that glisten feel to her. And her up right there. Side there. And again, you're going to be messing around with this a lot. Just the color theory, just keep all that in mind about what light affects, what kind of light affects, you know, the colors. If you got a warm color, then you're going to have a cool shadow like this, and that's the difference between the two. So I'll lay this on top of the leg there. The women you don't want to model too much because they're going to start looking, you know, really muscular, and they're going to start looking like men, and you don't want that. You want them to have a nice nice smooth feel to it. I'm going to take this arm in a little bit. And this is going to stay a little bit darker over here just because that's not where the sunlight's hitting. So now my favorite part is going really extreme with it and getting that nice glisten effect right there. You know, don't be afraid to just lay that right on the top, because that's what's going to make your image pop. When you see that in print, it's going to look amazing. You might need to play around with it a little bit. You know, you're going to get sometimes where you get right here and it looks a little too unnatural, but if you just kind of eyedrop it and blend it in, it's going to look fine. I like this over the cut and grad method. I like the more airbrushed approach just because I think I have a little bit more control and it looks a little bit more realistic, and also I have my fingerprint on it. You can see some of the brush strokes and whatnot. I think this is looking pretty good so far. I'm gonna keep this glisten here. Now, I'm getting a little bit off the count. Actually, no, I'm not. This looks good as far as the color still being there. I think we're not getting too washed out on the color. I think this looks pretty good. So, remember I said we're gonna go back with the shadows and we're gonna go on top of our highlights and bring them back very solid. So make sure you remember that there's going to be some light showing on the cheek over there. All this is anatomical stuff that you're going to learn on your own. Basically just running through all this is just kind of color theory. So I've got it kind of where I want it, and now I'm going to go back with some of my shadows. Take it down just a little further, and I'm going to do 100% opacity on this one. Switch back to my airbrush tool and just go along. Go along some of the curves here with that. Go a little bit more cool and just kind of pull it out there. Now I don't want to use that same color right here because it's going to be different. Maybe a little bit right there. Let's see, I'm going to put a little bit on the, oops, let's switch back to this tool. A little bit of the breast there. Again, this is all trial and error. Control Z will let you redo it. It's a wonderful thing to have. Go back here where the hair is hitting and put some of that right there. Maybe right here and along where the armor hits. So you can really define these shapes. Maybe a little bit darker in here. I mean, you can just see how that definition just pops, and you can go right back over it with your lighter color if you'd like. Right here with a glove, I'm going to see some glove shadow. I'm going to take some of that and maybe pull it over a little bit, so you can see how the light hits right here and comes across the glove, and then where it gets. So I'm going to use these lines that I'm making to determine what the rest of the body is going to look like. So follow those, because if you have it done right, it's going to look amazing. Now I could have just left it the way it was and it's still going to look good, but these little nuances here are going to be really what affects your whole image. And make sure that all your shadowing is done at 100%, because that's going to be super solid, and it's going to define everything that you're working in. I'm going to take a little bit of this and go down here. And that was a little maybe too much. I'm going to go back. Okay, so I think this looks pretty good. I might go back and put a few more highlights up here. Switch back to 30. Increase some of my highlights. Also, yes, with the head, you want to go back and maybe define some of the hair, the shadows of the hair falling on the face or whatnot. I always like that. I don't know, something like that. You can go mess around with it however you choose. So I think the body's pretty well covered here.